Week 15, Part 1. 28.1, Outlining the Textual Evaluation. Outlining. For Project 3, the final product is an evaluation of the evidence used to answer the following research question. What intentional shifts were made to communicate across spaces and audiences? Outlining is an important step in the writing process, but we have discovered that outlines can range from formal and fully developed to beginner level and basic. While we want to make space for you to submit your outline of the textual evaluation, we also want to let you start exploring how you want to structure the role of outlining within your process. The more fully developed your outline is at this submission stage, the easier it will be to evolve and transition into a strong textual evaluation, and the better feedback you will be able to receive. Any outline from basic to book length will start with the assignment expectations. Research questions. As you think through the outlining process, the first step is simply to consider the research question around which the exploration is organized. The most important step is to answer the question, but feel free to deconstruct the question as needed. The question can be read closely and critically like any text. To start, consider key terms, intentional and what, and assumptions that we make the moves in the question. Our question asks what intentional shifts you made to communicate across spaces and audiences. Like many research questions, there are multiple parts that can be broken up and down. The question assumes you made shifts, but you can still clarify the assumption. Your work across Project 3 should inform your response. If, then, you know that you do, in fact, make shifts, feel free to state that in your introduction. The question also assumes that the shifts are intentional. Through your textual evaluation, you may find that some, but not all, are intentional, which should be a point worth clarifying in your first section. Remember that the research will answer the question, which means that you do not have to have a clear answer to start. You may know that you make moves, but you don't know yet what you will find in your sample text, and you don't know which moves you will identify and which of those you will want to highlight in your evaluation. For most writers, an introduction is built bit by bit through the process of outlining, researching, and writing, but is the last thing they write. After you conduct your evaluation of the text, circle back around to your introduction and revisit the research question at the end when you have a clear answer. In addition to answering the research question, you also know that another requirement is to use 3 samples of your writing as sources, so that is probably a useful way to think through your outline. Situated sample. The assignments in Project 3 have allowed you to start looking at your writing. For your textual evaluation, select 3 texts that you think will provide you with the content necessary to evaluate the moves you made. Since you only have 1,000 to 1,200 words, you will want to keep each sample well under a paragraph. If you find a longer text, just excerpt the section that highlights your move. You can either select 3 texts that demonstrate connected moves or that demonstrate a range of moves. For instance, if you select an academic text in which you use jargon and you highlight that move, you could also select a text from a communication within a discourse community that demonstrates the use of different site-specific and audience-intended jargon as a similar move. Showing 3 similar moves would likely result in a conclusion that discusses the role of that move as a practice that moves across different areas of your life and communications. Or you can show how jargon tailored for the academic text and sneak in your discourse community and concession in a personal space. Comparing those moves would likely result in a conclusion that noted the different facets of your identity you switch between in each different space. While you can assume that the introduction and conclusion are expectations, and while you know that you are to evaluate 3 samples of your own writing, how you organize the evaluation is up to you. As you think through how you want to outline your evaluation and which text you will evaluate, consider the concepts we have explored throughout Project 3, such as the space where they are created or posted, the audience and intention, and the related moves. Space. To evaluate your text, you will probably want to consider where they were located. If you plan to use an assignment you posted for our class, a discussion thread in Canvas would be the concrete space. If you participated in the discourse community you explored in Project 2, the location that DC used to communicate could also be a space. If you participate in any similar or other DCs, feel free to consider those as well. Think through some standard spaces: Facebook, a wiki, a thread/forum, Snapchat, Instagram, LinkedIn, Reddit, email, Discord, YouTube, text, a listserv, Tumblr, TikTok, Twitter, Wix, WhatsApp, Pinterest, multiplayer games, dating sites, mediums, archives, WhatsApp, GroupMe, Flickr, Trello, Teams, Slack, Vimeo, etc., etc. As you provide information on each space associated with the text you are evaluating, consider how it functions and how the rules and oversights and regulations impact the space. Consider how aspects of the space impact your sample that was created in and for that space. For example, if a space limits the number of characters, that will have a direct impact on the text communicated in that space. Similarly, whether or not a post can be deleted probably influences your communication. And if you don't include audio, video, or still image elements, you become dependent on text differently. Don't overlook if and how others can respond and interact as an important function of the space that impacts your moves. You can also think of Gladwell's discussions about networks and hierarchies and consider how each space contributes to or hinders the development of either. What other pieces of information would be useful to help your audience understand each space? Remember that the genre is expository, so a main goal is to inform your audience. Audience, in fact, is another element you can include in your evaluation. Audience. In order to understand why you constructed the text you constructed, the audience you wrote to and for deserves attention. To start, think of whether the group receiving your communication constitutes a discourse community. Did you invite members, making you the center of your thread, or were you invited to an existing thread? Do you decide who can see your post, or for how long, or do others control the interactions? Is the space well known to the public? Who can see and see that you have an account? Who can see you and see that you have an account? Can anyone nudge or poke or friend or IM you? As you think of the audience, consider whether they are connected beyond the space. Just as you participate in multiple spaces and communities, think of the audience members in each of your groups and where their connections might overlap or converge in the constellation Swales described. If you are the center of your constellation, what stars are in your formation? What form do they create? And what other forms can you see around you? Imagine a Venn diagram with multiple overlapping circles, or a cluster diagram or bubble map, or brainstorming of any information visualization that helps you think through the layers of overlapping identity. Situate yourself in relation to the audience, recognizing that you are the audience for the writing of the people to whom you write, meaning you read what they write. Are the connections across the group weak or strong? How does the space impact the connections? How do the connections impact the text? Understanding who you are writing to and for will help you identify the reason you are writing. Intention. Another useful consideration for your outline and for your overall evaluation is the intention of text you are writing in the spaces you are evaluating. Intention is tied to audience and genre, so when you evaluate the text directly, you want to know why they were written so that you can identify the moves you made in response to audience based on why you were writing in the first place. Think of the specific text and its intention, but also conceptualize the overall intention of the space. What do you use that space for? Why are other participants in the space? What genres do you send, and what do you receive in return? Once you understand why you are in the space, you can look at the situated samples, the text you selected, with the perspective of the larger reasons they were written. For instance, if you're on a dating site, a textual communication may have the specific goal of sharing information, but that cannot be divorced from the larger goal, which is possibly seeing if you have a connection to the person with whom you are exchanging text. Within these layers of contextualized intentions, the moves you make in the text you send will make more sense. Moves. All of those considerations can be a part of your search for moves. The results, your findings, will share what your textual evaluation revealed by stating and discussing the major moves. Remember, the moves not only live within a space and time, they are often generated where they live. As a result, you are free to explore any move you recognize as a recognized move within a space, but make sure you explain the move and how it functions so that your peers and instructor, who probably don't occupy the space or understand the move, can understand the meaning of the move and how it connects to you and connects you to others. When you describe the moves you made, it would be helpful to explain the choices you made and how they connect to space, audience, and intention. Clarify why you made the move and what you hoped would be the result. You can also note when the moves were intentional and conscious, or either or neither. And in addition to identifying and explaining the moves, connect them to context and to yourself. Conclusion. Regardless of how you get to the conclusion, a strong conclusion will make all the work meaningful by connecting your writing to yourself. Once you have the evidence and have identified the moves, zoom out and look at all three together in order to tell us what they tell about you. What is different about you in each space, and what stays the same? How do you use writing to move across selves and spaces? Think about switching and meshing. What parts of yourselves do you dissect or disengage when you're in some spaces? What parts connect and combine in other spaces? How do you modify your language to represent a specific identity? How do you feel about you as you switch? Where are you most comfortable and why? Where does it take the most effort and why? Allow yourself to look forward as well. Consider how this work will impact your communications in each space. Were you already aware of your moves? Do you feel empowered by knowing you can switch, or disempowered by feeling like you must? Are there parts of yourself you refuse to negotiate for specific audiences? Why? Do you ever feel like you can't shift because you don't know the other language? And do you ever feel othered or judged for any elements of your linguistic identity? You're free to explore any or all of these questions or others in your conclusion, but be sure to stay linked to the work at hand, which is to answer the research question based on your evaluation of textual evidence. And while the freedom to consider all these other aspects and frame them within your own approach can be overwhelming, remember that the basic outline is offered in the assignment. Question: evaluation of 3 sources in search of moves. Answer: how you play with that structure is up to you. Given what you know about outlining, how can you grow the basic structure? And how can you include course content? Perhaps the next step is just something like this. Question: text 1, space, audience, intention, move. Text 2, space, audience, intention, move. Text 3, space, audience, intention, move. And the answer. How can you play with that structure? How can you play with the stability of a basic structure? Remember that a main reason we outline is to give ourselves space to think. Assignment 28.1. Upload the outline for your textual evaluation, and then begin to evolve it to submit for self-review.